ASMR, ASMR, ASMR. Today, we are doing a long-awaited part 2 of my bookshelf tour with my graphic novels. This is probably my least populated of the genres. Sorry, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little novels over here to chat about, but I still trust in my rambling prowess that this will be a longish video, so do not fret, there will be plenty of rambles. And I think we'll go in chronological order of when I got them. I don't know exactly the first one, but I'm just gonna go with a guess. So it's between Scott Pilgrim Volume 2 and the Hardy Boys that I got first. But I believe, let me just put these other ones down. But I believe Scott Pilgrim, I remember watching that movie when I was like 13 or like 12, which is probably around like 2012, 2011. I'm leaning more towards 2012. Whereas the Hardy Boys, I feel like this would have been a little earlier, like when I was 10 or 11, so that would be around, I wouldn't say 10, I'll say like 11, 12. So I feel like that would have been around 2009, 2010, probably 2009 I'm leaning towards. So let's just go with that. Firstly, we have a Hardy Boys graphic novel, subtitled Dude Ranch of Death. This is number 12 in this Paper Cuts series. Yeah, I feel like I have shown this in another video because I'm getting deja vu right now. But like in some like random trigger video, I feel like I like traced the words. Anyways, this is a Hardy Boys little mini adventure graphic novel. I was really into the Hardy Boys as a young lad. I remember in primary school, like grade 2, grade 3, around that time, I feel like every term we had to like pick a book out from the library and write like a book report on it. I feel like not like an actual like a page, like less than a page long. This is like very young kid stuff. So not like a serious book report, but it's like summarize the story of a book that you read that term that you got at the library. And dude, it was a battle to get the Hardy Boys ones, because as you would imagine, a lot of the young boys were really into the Hardy Boys. So yeah, I've read a lot of the Hardy Boys when I was younger, and then when I was getting into comic books, again around the time I was like 11, 12, and a little bit before that as well. So I don't know exactly where I got this, but my theory is at that time in my life, and even a little bit before, like I want to say like 2007 or 8 up until like 2010, maybe a little bit before 2010, 2009 maybe, there was this shop called Paperweight at the mall that we went to a lot when I was growing up. And they sold a lot of like imported magazines and comic books and stuff. So that's actually when I read a lot of Beano. If you are a British viewer, perhaps you are familiar. We had, Beano with the real Dennis the Menace with black hair and the black and red striped sweater with his dog, Nasher. Not that blonde poser Dennis the Menace, the real Dennis the Menace from the Beano. You got Minnie the Minx, the Bash Street Kids. Oh, there was the one boy that like ran really fast. I forget his name. And then you had like I'm not gonna try to remember every little like comic in the Beano, every little like comic strip in the Beano. But anyway, I got the Beano and like Archie comics as well. I read a lot from there. And I'm guessing that I persuaded my parents to buy me this on one of those trips to that shop. And yeah, it is pretty much a typical Hardy Boys story. I'll read you the blurb right now. I'll just show you first. It's the Hardy Boys Out West. It's the Hardy Boys Out West. This is written by Scott Lobdell and Paulo Henrique. Of course, based on the series by Franklin W. Dixon. It's the Hardy Boys Out West. Saddle up for adventure with America's favorite undercover brothers. when several teens go missing. At a tough love western camp, Frank and Joe Hardy are sent in by ATAC to investigate. I believe ATAC is like American Teens Against Crime, but I don't actually know. I don't actually remember. But what happens when Frank and Joe find themselves surrounded by kids that like being bad and the out of control administrators that intend to keep it that way? We'll have to find out. And then we have a wonderful picture of my personal favorite Hardy boy, Joe, in his cowboy garb, doing a wonderful move with his lasso on a nice little horse. Probably not little. But yeah, I guess I'll show you just to sample the art style. Yeah, it's just a nice, very kind of what you would expect out of a Hardy Boys story. It starts out with him saving a young lady that is strapped to a roller coaster. She's the daughter of some powerful guy, if I remember correctly. And they save her. It's kind of like the cold open, and then they are in high school. Over here, they're just in school, and then they get the tape. Is it a tape? We have some bully interaction where our smart boy Joe shows up the bully, and then they get a disc in one of their lockers that has their mission brief about this camp, and then they go on the camp. Joe is an instructor, and then Frank, he goes in posing as like a delinquent. And then I'm not going to spoil the story because obviously you guys are immediately going to find this obscure Hardy Boys graphic novel and read it for yourselves. But yeah, I don't even remember how it ends, but they solve the crime. Yeah, and then, this actually looks interesting. There's a Nancy Drew graphic novel advertised in the back as well. There's a little picture of that. But yeah, cool graphic novel. It's the Hardy Boys as you expect them most, but now with a much more visual aid. Next up, we have Scott Pilgrim, Volume 2, versus the World. Scott Pilgrim versus the World. The name of the series is actually just Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim versus the World is just the title of this specific one. You'll see another one later on to counter this example. But yeah, the movie gets its name from this volume, but the movie does adapt the whole 6-volume series. Yeah, I got this after I watched the movie, which was in 2012. I think the movie came out in 2010, but for whatever reason, I only watched it in 2012, I believe. Maybe 2011, I can't remember. But yeah, around that time, I am, 12, 13, 14. And, my whole personality is that I'm a gamer, geek. I don't have any other hobbies. If I'm not in school, I am either playing games or reading comics, because I used to get they had a comic book section at the library we went to, so I was fucking reading every Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, the Ultimates, Batman, Superman. I was reading every comic book that was available, and I was just all in on being that guy. As I said, when I'm not in school, I'm playing video games, or during the week, the school week, my parents wouldn't let me play video games. So I was reading comics or reading about comics and video games on the internet, or watching YouTube videos about them. So yeah, and being that kind of person at that time in my life, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the movie, was absolutely the perfect piece of media for me. It spoke to me in so many ways, because I was basically like a young preteen version of Scott Pilgrim, with the kind of little awkwardness as well. So yeah, I really loved it at the time, and actually it did, because I remember thinking, wow, this movie was made for me, and it just made me more, because I liked movies, and I would watch them, but I never really put that much thought into it or cared that much about who made them, the directors and the writers. I didn't really care before that, but I feel with that I was wait a minute, it just felt so perfect, perfectly suited to me, that I was made this? And that's actually when I got into, well, I discovered, oh, Edgar Wright, this is based on this graphic novel, blah, blah, blah. And that's what really got me into, like, movies, like, on a kind of a more nerdy way. Like, okay, I just, like, really got into Edgar Wright, and I, like, watched the Cornetto trilogy, and blah, 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 blah. And that kind of started my kind of film geek journey. From there, I just started reading a lot more, and, you know, branching out into other directors, blah, blah, blah. But we're not going to get into all that now. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is not really my favorite movie anymore. It's not even my favorite Edgar Wright movie. That's probably Hot Fuzz for those interested. But yeah, at the time it was just perfect for me. And obviously, knowing that it's based on a series of graphic novels, I really, really wanted to pick one up. So, this is the one I picked up. I remember being at a bookstore. It was at like a mini mall. And my mother or my parents, I feel like it was just my mother. I don't actually know, this is an unimportant detail, but let's just say my mother went, grocery shopping, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna go into the bookstore. And I saw it was this one and a few others. I know it was not the whole series, but there were like a handful of volumes of Scott Pilgrim. And I honestly wanted to buy them all, but they were like quite expensive. So I only got this one, mainly because it's the one that the movie is named after. So I thought, oh, that's the one I should get. This is volume 2 of 6. And dude, I remember at the time I had a crush on this girl. And we were kind of in the, I guess, like, courting over text phase. And I remember just asking, like, oh, what are you doing? Or me asking her, like, oh, what are you doing? And me saying, oh, I'm out here, like, looking at graphic novels. And she was like, oh, what's a graphic novel? And I was like, oh, it's like a novel, comic book, whatever I said. Yeah, I just remember, like, I can replay it in my mind right now. I'm like squatted down because the graphic novels were like, or at least the Scott Pilgrim ones were like at the bottom, like on the floor shelf. So I remember being like squatted down, like deciding, I don't know which one I'm gonna pick. And I feel like I probably told this girl I had a crush on, like, oh, they have these off from the movie, it's what the movie's based on, blah, 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 blah. I don't know which one to pick. But anyways, I ended up I have a little bit of oob lore over there, L-O-R-E, lore, not law, L-A-W, lore, a little bit of oob lore for you guys up there. But yeah, I picked up this one. We did not end up like going out, me and that girl I had a crush on in 2012, because I just was too scared to ever actually ask her out, even though like her friends like wanted me to, but I was an idiot, man. Anyways, I got this, and for those curious, this goes from, well, it actually starts, wonderful little title page, it starts with a flashback that is not in the movie, where he, I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but I remember this being my favorite thing in the world in 2012. Like, I remember taking this to class and like showing it to other kids to show them that I was cool, that I liked this. Looking at it now, obviously it's dumb, but that's kind of the point. The antagonist here says, "Is this the best St. Joel's could muster?" And then Scott replies with, "That's not what your mom said last night," with 2 exclamation points. So yeah, 2012 me was like, oh my god, incredible, and then they fight. But yes, so it starts with a little flashback, and then as far as the movie, this is, so this covers his fight with Lucas Lee, who is played by Chris Evans in the movie, the skateboarder, like action film star. some like really direct references to the comic book panels here. Okay, this is when oh my god, I'm blanking on his name, but Wallace, I believe his name is Wallace. Yes, Wallace Wells, erstwhile roommate of the hero, 25 years old. This is when Wallace tells Scott that he has to break up with Knives Chow because at this point he's already like met Ramona. And I remember this specifically being in the movie when I'll just read this little section. So Wallace says, "Look, Scott, I'm going to issue an ultimatum." Scott replies, "One of your famous ultimatums." And then Wallace says, "It may live in infamy. You have to break up with Knives tonight." Have to. You have to. Okay. And then Scott says, but it's hard. That is definitely a thing in the movie, unless I'm just remembering it correctly. And then I love this so much. Scott is just like throwing playground insults at Wallace. You absolutely cannot see it because I can't even see it, and it goes so tiny. It's so cool. Anyways, I'm not gonna go through this whole thing and talk about the movie, but yeah, it does the whole Lucas Lee fight, and then another cool iconic image. We go through the Lucas Lee fight, and then we get to the start of the start of like Clash at the start of the third Evil Ex-Boyfriend. We get to like the introduction. Another iconic shot here. Hi, Scott. Which we get from Scott's ex-girlfriend, played by Brie Larson in the movie. What is her name, actually? Envy Adams. Anywho, yeah, it ends with, Envy and the third Evil Ex-Boyfriend like entering the scene, and yeah, a story about why it looks the way it does. So one day, randomly, probably in like late 2012, 2013, something like that, the geyser in my parents' house like burst, and there was just a lot of like water flooding. It happened like while my father was like picking me up from school. So then when we got home, we like saw this, and like everything was terrible. My room in particular, there was a lot of like water, like, I mean, not like serious water damage, but like my floor was flooded. It kind of messed up my like laminated flooring. But this was in my cupboard, and this was like soaked. And then I think I just left it in the sun, and it still looks like pretty good. Obviously, some pages are like extremely sepia toned, but overall it survived. And from that day on, I thought, hey, you know what? I'm gonna take this graphic novel with me, like I took it with me to you, because I just felt like, wow, it survived that. This is my good luck charm. So I took this with me in university. Now it's with me here. Like, I don't have any of my other like childhood books really, but this one I felt like, it went through a lot. So I'm gonna keep it. Yeah. Let's go Pilgrim vs. the World, Volume 2. Next up, the Sandman Overture by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by J.H. Williams III and Dave Stewart. Winner of the Hugo Award. This one, I swindled myself. So what had happened was there was a like comic book expo. It was not Comic Con. It was actually more of like a comic book writers expo that I think my uncle, one of my uncles, had like an extra ticket to. He's like a comic book store. He owned a comic book store. Still does. I don't actually know. And he had an extra ticket to this like comic book writers convention, and I was in I think this was in my first year of university, so 2017, and he had an extra ticket, and he was like, "Hey, Ethan, do you want to go?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, dude!" So I went there, and I felt something. And I'd heard about the Sandman as this like legendary comic book that you have to read. It's so good, it's so incredible, you have to read it. And I was like, okay, cool. The Sandman Overture. I did not have the foresight to Google Sandman Overture and whether or not I could like read this before reading. I thought this was just like the first part of the Sandman, but it's actually not. This is a prequel, so it was written way after the original series, and it, as I said, it's a prequel and overture show. So kind of goes over what happened before, Sandman proper. It's very cool. The art is incredible. It is very just cool, and I just love it so much. It's a beautiful book. Gorgeous from start to finish, as IGN said. It has one like really cool like page that opens up here. If I could, there we go. I don't know how well that's gonna look, but how well that's gonna come out, I mean. But yeah, incredible graphic novel. But I had never read anything about Sandman. And I just felt like I had to get it. This was the only Sandman thing there, so like the original like series wasn't there. At one of the stores that I was at, and I was like, oh, fucking I'll just buy this and I'll have something. And I bought it, and then as I'm reading it, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I have no clue. Because as I said, this is a prequel. But I started reading it and I'm like, this makes no fucking sense. I don't know what's happening. I feel like I'm missing something here. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, this is a prequel. This is not the actual original Sandman. So then I was kind of like, I just like put off reading it until I just read the actual Sandman. I have actually since then read a few issues. Like digitally, I have them. I bought them on what was the comics, that one like really popular like comic book reading like service app thing that is now owned by Amazon, which is really annoying because I had to like use an Amazon account. Anyways, that I'm sure you know what I mean if you're like into comics. I actually have since started reading it there. I could probably be able to read this now that I have at least a baseline of information about what's going on in the world. But yeah, very beautiful. One of my favorite looking things to just have. It's honestly, if I don't have an actual coffee table, but like would be in a great coffee table book to just look at for all the beautiful images, even if you're not actually reading it. So I do not regret buying it, and I'm sure I will get some amount of pleasure from reading it once I do. After I don't know. Actually, I would probably have to, because I haven't read actual Sandman in a while either. So I'd probably have to like read a bit more, just to like get my mind back into the world, and then I'll read the overture. Eventually, at some point, I don't know. We'll see. Next up, this is 2021. This is 2019. Okay. Next up, we have Mouse by Art Spiegelman, the complete Mouse. We know of the Pulitzer Prize, another graphic novel that I had heard about a lot as being incredible, and you should read it. So for those that are unaware, this is about actually Art Spiegelman interviewing his father because his father was a Polish Jewish man, a Polish Jew, during the whole, Nazi occupation of Poland, during World War II and before. And so it's about, firstly, Art Spiegelman interviewing his father. So like, it actually has like steps about him going to his father's house and blah blah blah, and then the actual his father's actual story about everything that happened. Yeah, it's very very cool, quirky art style. Um, yeah, it's just really, really cool and interesting. All the Nazis are cats, and all the Jewish people are mice. And yeah, it's just a really cool. Firstly, it's just historically interesting because of like the World War II story, but also it's like very heartfelt and cool. Just about the like father-son relationship in the little like breaks between the like action of the father's story. Like yeah, the like story between the father and son is also really cool as the graphic novel goes on. Yeah, I highly recommend it if you're interested. It's a great story. I guess you would call it like an alternate comic because it's not like about superheroes or like Scott Pilgrim or anything like that. It's way more of like a grounded kind of thing, but still very very good nonetheless. Highly recommend it if you are interested in just a fun story or like kind of World War II and kind of things that happen around then. Yeah, it's just great, incredible. As I said, I bought this in 2019. I was in university. Um, but yeah, it's awesome. Great art style. And yeah, just a wonderful, wonderful story. And finally, we have Scott Pilgrim Volume 4. Scott Pilgrim keeps it together. This one I bought in 2021. So quite recently. I think I just I'm not, as I mentioned, I'm not as into Scott Pilgrim now as I was when I was like really like in that kind of gamer comic book guy like world. But I think it's still like an important piece of media just in my life because as I said, it kind of turned me into like a film geek and like put me down that branch, which is now like one of my big interests. So yeah, this is the color edition. As you see, we have the wonderful Wallace on the front cover here. Yeah, this is volume 4. It covers the fourth Evil X. Remember, fourth Evil X, not Evil Ex-Boyfriend. Importantly, yes, I guess I'll read you the blurb. Scott Pilgrim is ready for summertime, but who can relax? Welcome back to Scott Pilgrim's nightmarish and little existence. His relationship with Ramona Flowers is sweeter than ever, but he's still got girl troubles. 7 evil ex-boyfriends still want to kill him, and worst of all, now she wants him to get a job. Remember, 7 evil exes, not ex-boyfriends. But yeah, we have the 4th evil ex over there, and yeah. It looks great in color. It's cool. This is the scene where young Neil is now kind of dating Knives Chow. But yeah, it just covers the 4th Evil X. The one thing that I will say about the graphic novel is that it's a lot more. I feel like it paints Scott and Ramona both as like imperfect characters a lot more. I feel like the movie makes Scott seem a lot more of like a good protagonist, and Ramona is a little bit more of like a villain-ish. Whereas I feel like again the graphic novel, they have way more time to like do the backstory and stuff. It's way more balanced, and I enjoy it a lot more for that reason. But I do kind of understand. You have like, I think it's like a 90-minute movie, so. But yeah, I do tend to enjoy the graphic novels more than the film. There was just a knock. But yeah, I don't enjoy them as much now as I did back then. But still very good. And as I said, the novels are more interesting, better to me than the film. But yeah, it is the way it is. This color edition does have a few extras. So here we have an illustration for Draw Magazine. We have a comic strip here that was used for Comics Festival 2007, a free comic book day anthology. And yeah, and then we have some just other random little. Oh, this is a comic strip made for Toronto's Now magazine in 2006. We just have some extras. We have alternate covers over here. And the original back cover art. Yeah, just loads of cool stuff. We have some stuff about Brian Lee O'Malley's. Brian Lee O'Malley. Was it just Brian O'Malley? It is Brian Lee O'Malley. About the process for the artwork. Very cool. I will say, when I was in my Scott Pilgrim peak in like 2012, I did try to write my own, draw my own Scott Pilgrim comic book. I think it was the character's name was Ethan Awesome. My name is Ethan, as I've like mentioned in passing. Ethan Awesome was his full name, and yeah, there was actually a romantic plot with me and a girl based on that girl I had a crush on that I mentioned earlier back in 2012 in grade 8. And I remember like showing off like my version of her to her and her friends, and they were all like snickering about it and whatever. But yeah, I do actually wish I could like find that out. It would be so interesting to read. But I only ever wrote like one issue. I think it started just with like the guy in school, and he had this like, he was British, not the guy, the main character. The main character was South African like me, but his villain, like his nemesis, that's the word I'm searching for, was this British guy who wore glasses. I can't remember his name, but there was like some interaction with him. There was introduction of the love interest, and then I think he like walked home from school, and then he like found this old comic book store, like old video game store, that like it exploded, and then he got powers from it, and like that was like the beginning, and oh, he has powers, and I think that was the end of the first issue, and I never got further than that. But yeah, I think on that bombshell, we're going to end this video. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching this. And thank you for 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, that is so amazing. I love you guys so much. Thank you for all the support. Yeah, a wonderful milestone to hit. Thank you all again. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, whenever you're watching this. And I will see you in the next one.